She thought you'd be the one waiting. But the moment she realizes you've already moved on, that's when everything changes. In most situations, she assumes she has time. Time to think, time to decide, time to come back if she wants to. And underneath that assumption is a deeper belief that no matter what happens, you'll still be there. Maybe not in the exact same way, but emotionally available, still connected, still holding on to what once was, because that's what she's experienced before. Men who stay attached long after things end, men who keep checking in, keep watching, keep waiting for a second chance. And when that pattern repeats enough, it starts to feel like the standard, like something she can rely on without even thinking about it. So when she steps away, she doesn't fully feel the loss, not immediately. There's still a sense of control, a sense that the connection hasn't completely disappeared. She might not be reaching out, but she assumes you're still thinking about her, still emotionally invested, still within reach. That belief gives her comfort. It allows her to move forward without truly letting go. Because in her mind, nothing is final as long as you're still there in some form. But then something shifts. She notices the silence. Not the kind of silence that feels temporary, but the kind that feels intentional. There are no messages, no reactions, no signs that you're still holding on. And at first, she might brush it off. Assume you're just taking space, dealing with things, or waiting for the right moment to reach out. But as time passes, that assumption becomes harder to hold on to because your energy feels different, not distant in a reactive way, but detached in a grounded way. There's no urgency, no emotional pull, no sign that you're trying to reconnect. And that's when the realization begins to form. You didn't just step back, you moved on. And that realization hits differently because it wasn't supposed to happen this way. In her mind, she was the one with the time advantage, the one who could decide when or if things would restart. But now that position is gone. Instead of feeling like she has control, she starts to feel the absence, the space where your attention used to be, the certainty that you were emotionally available. And in that space, a new feeling emerges, uncertain, because now she doesn't know where she stands with you. She doesn't know if she can come back to something that no longer feels open. And that lack of clarity creates something she didn't expect to feel, the fear of being too late. Because the moment she realizes you've already moved on is the moment she understands she may have lost something real without even seeing it happen. At first, she's not thinking about you in the way you might expect. When things end, there's often a sense of distance, a kind of emotional space where she can step back and process without feeling pressure. And in that space, she's not forced to confront everything at once. She can move through her thoughts at her own pace without urgency, without the need to figure everything out immediately. That's why in the beginning, there isn't much curiosity. There's no reason for it because curiosity comes from the unknown, from something that feels just out of reach. But if she believes she still understands you, if she assumes your feelings haven't changed, that you're still emotionally connected in the same way, then there's nothing to question. In her mind, the story is already written. She knows how you feel. She knows how you'd respond if she reached out. She believes that if she ever decided to come back, you'd still be there, ready to pick things up where they left off. And that belief removes any need for deeper thought. But that changes the moment your behavior no longer matches her expectations. When you stop reaching out, stop reacting, and stop showing any signs of emotional attachment, it disrupts the version of you she had in her mind. Suddenly, the story she thought she understood doesn't make sense anymore. And when something doesn't make sense, the mind naturally tries to fill in the gaps. That's where curiosity begins. Not because you said something to trigger it, but because you removed something she had grown used to, your emotional presence, and in its place, there's silence. Not empty silence, but a kind that feels intentional, grounded, and controlled. Now she starts to notice the difference. There are no small signals, no subtle reminders that you're still thinking about her, no reactions to what she does, no attempts to reconnect. And that absence creates a question she didn't have before. What changed? That question doesn't come from you chasing, it comes from you stepping back. And once it appears, it doesn't go away easily. Because the more she thinks about it, the more she realizes she doesn't have an answer. And when someone doesn't have an answer, they start looking for one. She might revisit old conversations, replay moments, think about how things ended. She might start comparing how you are now to how you were before. And in that comparison, the difference becomes clear. You're not the same. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that demands attention, but in a quiet, steady way that feels real. And that's what makes it powerful because it doesn't feel like you're trying to prove anything. It feels like something has genuinely shifted within you. And that shift creates a kind of tension she can't ignore. Because now, instead of you trying to understand her, she's trying to understand you. Because the moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment she starts trying to figure you out. At some point, she begins to notice that your life doesn't revolve around her anymore, not in a dramatic way, not something you announce or try to show off, but in the way you carry yourself, in the way your energy feels different, more focused, more grounded, less attached to what she's doing or not doing. And that shift doesn't come from words, it comes from action. When you start investing your time into your own growth, your goals, your direction, something changes. You're no longer available in the same way. Your attention isn't constantly directed outward, waiting for something from her. Instead, it's directed inward and forward toward building something that exists with or without her. And that's what she picks up on because before, there was a sense that your world included her at the center, that your decisions, your energy, your emotional state were all somehow connected to the relationship. But now that connection feels different, not broken in a reactive way, but released in a controlled, intentional way. You're not showing signs of waiting, you're not lingering in the background of her life, you're not reacting to what she does or seeking validation from her presence. And in that absence of need, something powerful emerges: independence. That independence sends a message without ever needing to be spoken. It shows that you've reclaimed something that was once given away: your time, your focus, your sense of direction. And when a man operates from that place, his value shifts, not because he's trying to appear valuable, but because he's no longer giving his value away freely. And that's where perception changes. She begins to see you differently, not as someone who's left behind, but as someone who moved forward, someone who didn't stop when the relationship ended, someone who didn't lose himself in the process. And that contrast matters because in many cases, she expects a certain kind of reaction, a lingering attachment, a visible struggle, some sign that the breakup had a strong emotional impact on you. But when those signs aren't there, when instead there's quiet progress and steady movement, it disrupts that expectation. Now, instead of feeling like she has something you're missing, she starts to question whether she misunderstood your value in the first place. Because you're not acting like someone who lost everything, you're acting like someone who redirected everything. And that's a completely different image to hold in her mind. It's no longer about what you had together, it's about what you're becoming without her. And that shift creates a new kind of respect, one that doesn't rely on emotional attachment, but on observation. Because when a man moves on with purpose, he doesn't just change his life, he changes how he's seen. When you're no longer there, something changes in a way that words never could. Your presence used to fill certain spaces in her life: conversations, routines, emotional support, attention she may not have even realized she relied on. And when that presence disappears completely, those spaces don't just stay empty, they become noticeable. At first, she might not feel it right away. There's still the assumption that you're there somewhere in the background, that if she wanted to reach out, you'd respond, that the connection, even if inactive, still exists in some form. That belief softens the reality of your absence. But as time passes, that belief starts to weaken because your silence doesn't feel temporary. It doesn't feel like you're waiting. It feels like something has shifted on a deeper level. And that's when the absence becomes real, not just physically, but emotionally. She starts to notice the difference in small moments. The times when she would normally share something with you, but now there's no one to send it to. The conversations that would have happened but don't. The reaction she used to get from you but no longer does. And those moments begin to add up, not in a dramatic, overwhelming way, but in a quiet, consistent way that's hard to ignore. Because absence has a unique effect. It doesn't shout, it echoes. It lingers in the background and slowly becomes more defined over time. That's when reflection begins. She starts to think about what used to be there, about how you showed up, how you engaged, how you were present. And in that reflection, she begins to see things from a different perspective, not through the lens of the relationship as it was, but through the lens of what's now missing. And that contrast is what creates emotional impact because when something is consistently present, it's easy to overlook. It blends into the routine, becomes part of the normal flow of life. But when it's gone, the value becomes clearer. The details stand out more. The significance becomes easier to recognize. This isn't something you force. It's not something you create through effort or explanation. It's something that happens naturally when you step back and allow space to exist. And in that space, she's left with her own thoughts, her own questions, her own realization of what your absence actually means. But by the time that realization fully forms, the dynamic has already changed because you're no longer the person who's available in the same way. You've moved forward. You've created distance that isn't just physical, it's emotional, mental, and intentional. And that distance becomes something she can't easily close because the more she feels your absence, the more she understands what it meant when you were there. And that understanding doesn't come from what you said, it comes from what you're no longer giving. After she's seen how you handled things, how you moved on, how you stayed composed, how you didn't react the way most people do, something subtle but powerful begins to take shape in her mind. It's not something she actively decides, and it's not something she talks about openly, but it becomes a reference point because every experience leaves an imprint, not just the relationship itself, but how it ended, how it felt, and how the other person carried themselves through that ending. And when someone shows a level of emotional control and clarity that isn't common, it stands out more than anything else. Most men don't handle breakups with that kind of stability. They react, they chase, they try to fix things in the moment, driven by emotion instead of grounded in self awareness. And because that pattern is so common, it becomes what she expects. So when you don't follow that pattern, when you stay grounded, when you don't rush to reconnect, when you don't let your emotions dictate your behavior, it creates contrast. And contrast is what makes something memorable. Without realizing it, she begins to compare, not in a conscious, deliberate way, but in the background of her experiences. When she interacts with other men, when she sees how they respond to pressure, how they handle emotional situations, how they carry themselves when things don't go their way, there's a quiet reference point she goes back to, the way you handled it. And that comparison isn't always in your favor in the moment, but it often becomes clearer over time because emotional reactions are easy to recognize, but emotional control is harder to find. It takes awareness, discipline, and a strong sense of identity. And when she sees that difference repeatedly, when she notices that others react more, chase more, lose control more, it reinforces the impression you left, not because you tried to stand out, but because you simply didn't follow the common pattern. This is where your behavior after the breakup becomes more impactful than anything that happened during the relationship because it defines how you're remembered moving forward. It sets a standard that others are measured against, even if she's not aware she's doing it. And over time, that standard becomes clearer, not just in how she views you, but in how she views relationships in general. Because once someone experiences a certain level of emotional stability, it becomes harder to accept anything less. But the key is this: you didn't do it for that outcome. You didn't handle things with control just to be remembered or compared. You did it because it aligned with who you are becoming. And that's what makes it real because when you operate from that place consistently, you don't just leave an impression, you redefine what she expects. Because the man who stays in control when everything is falling apart becomes the one no one else can replace. At some point, something shifts inside you that has nothing to do with her anymore. It's not about whether she comes back, what she's thinking, or how things could have been different. It's about you recognizing that your life doesn't pause just because a relationship ended. And once that realization settles in, your entire approach changes. Most people stay tied to outcomes. They focus on getting the person back, fixing what went wrong, or proving something. But when you move beyond that, when you stop chasing a result and start focusing on your own growth, you enter a completely different space. You're no longer reacting to what happened, you're responding by building something new. And that's where real transformation begins because now your energy isn't directed toward the past. It's directed toward becoming better, stronger mentally, more disciplined in your actions, more clear in your direction. You're not trying to fill a void anymore. You're creating a life that doesn't depend on someone else's presence to feel complete. This shift is subtle at first, but over time it becomes undeniable. The way you think changes, The way you carry yourself changes. Your priorities become more aligned with who you want to be, not what you lost. And here's where it becomes powerful. You're not doing it for her to see. You're not trying to prove that you've moved on. You're not trying to show her what she's missing. You're simply moving forward because it's the right thing for you. And that's what makes it real. Because when your growth is tied to someone else's attention, it fades when that attention isn't there. But when it comes from your own decision to evolve, it becomes permanent. It becomes part of who you are. Now, if she comes back, it doesn't change your path. You're not the same person she left. You're someone who has already accepted the situation and moved beyond it. You're no longer looking for validation, closure, or reassurance. You're grounded in yourself. And if she doesn't come back, nothing changes either because your direction was never dependent on her return. You've already built something within yourself that doesn't require it. This is the point where you become truly free. Free from needing outcomes, free from chasing approval, free from attaching your worth to someone else's choice. And that freedom is what makes you unforgettable. Not because you tried to be remembered, but because you became complete without needing to be. Because the moment you stop needing her to come back, is the moment you become the man she can't forget.